Commander Vex'tar of the Korathi Empire stood 7 feet tall, his crimson exoskeleton gleaming under the artificial lights of Harmony 7 Station. 4 arms crossed over his barrel chest, mandibles clicking with barely contained amusement as he surveyed the diplomatic gathering. Representatives from a dozen star systems mingled in the Grand Hall, discussing trade agreements and territorial disputes with the boring efficiency that made these peace summits so tedious. But today, Vex'tar had found entertainment. "So you are the human," he announced, his voice carrying the grinding quality of rocks in a cement mixer. "I have heard much about your species. Most of it quite amusing." Captain Jake Morrison looked up from his datapad, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. He was unremarkably average by human standards, medium height, brown hair going gray at the temples, wearing a simple blue uniform that looked more like a janitor's outfit than military dress. "Have you now? Well, I hope we've been providing adequate comic relief for the galaxy." Vex'tar's mandibles spread wide in what passed for a grin among his people. "Oh yes, quite adequate. The great human military, with your tiny ships and chemical propulsion. Your laughable attempts at space colonization. Your complete inability to master even basic energy manipulation." He gestured broadly to the other delegates, who had begun to take notice of the conversation. "Tell me, soft skin, what is humanity's greatest military achievement? I could use a good story to share at the victory celebrations when we return home." Jake set down his datapad and leaned back in his chair, that smile never wavering. "Greatest military achievement? Well now, that's a tough question. We've had so many to choose from." He paused, seeming to consider. "I suppose I could tell you about the time we stormed a beach that was essentially a death trap, knowing full well most of us wouldn't make it home." "A beach?" Vex'tar's laughter was like grinding metal. "You attacked a beach? What formidable enemy controlled this strategic shoreline? Hostile crustaceans?" The Zenithari delegate, Ambassador Clicksnock, chittered nervously. "Perhaps we should discuss the trade negotiations instead." "Nonsense." Vex'tar waved a dismissive arm. "I want to hear about humanity's great beach assault. This should be thoroughly entertaining." Jake nodded amiably. "Oh, it was something all right. Picture this, thousands of young men, most barely out of their teens, packed into metal boats crossing rough seas. They knew exactly what waited for them on that beach. Machine gun nests, artillery positions, mines, barbed wire. The whole shoreline designed specifically to kill anyone stupid enough to try landing there. And they turned around and went home, I assume?" Vex'tar asked, still chuckling. "Nope. They jumped out of those boats and ran straight into it." Jake's voice took on a conversational tone, as if he were discussing the weather. "June 6, 1944. We called it D-Day. 150,000 humans launched the largest amphibious invasion in our planet's history. They hit 5 beaches simultaneously, under murderous fire from entrenched positions." Vex'tar's amusement flickered slightly. 150,000? For a single beach assault? 5 beaches, Jake corrected gently. And that was just the first wave. The defenders had spent years preparing. They knew we were coming, they knew where we'd land, and they'd turned the entire coastline into a killing field, and concrete bunkers, overlapping fields of fire. Underwater obstacles designed to tear the bottoms out of landing craft. "Surely your forces retreated when faced with such defenses," suggested the Vorthan representative, her tentacles writhing uneasily. Jake shook his head. "Not exactly. See, the thing about humans is we're really, really stubborn. When those landing craft hit the obstacles and started sinking, the soldiers swam to shore. When the machine guns opened up, they crawled forward over the bodies of their friends. When the first assault failed, they sent in another wave. And another." The room had grown quieter, other conversations dying as delegates turned to listen. "But here's the truly impressive part," Jake continued, warming to his subject. "While this massive frontal assault was grinding forward, we had thousands of other humans scattered across occupied territory. Resistance fighters living in sewers and forests, blowing up supply lines, assassinating officers. gathering intelligence. We'd broken their communication codes months earlier, so we were reading their mail while pretending we couldn't. Vex'tar's mandibles had stopped clicking. You broke their encryption? Oh, we did more than that. We built machines specifically for breaking codes, mechanical brains that could process thousands of combinations per second. And while our boys were dying on the beaches, our scientists were in the desert building a weapon that could level entire cities with a single bomb. Impossible, Vex'tar scoffed, but his voice lacked conviction. No species could coordinate operations on such a scale. Jake's smile widened. Did I mention this was all humans fighting other humans? Same species, same planet, same basic technology level. The guys shooting at our boys on the beach, also humans. Every bit as smart, every bit as determined, every bit as creative in finding new ways to kill each other. The silence stretched longer this time. Ambassador Click's knock made a small choking sound. You wage war against your own kind? The Vorthan delegate whispered. Oh, constantly, Jake replied cheerfully. That particular war involved about 70 million casualties, give or take. But that was just one of our big ones. Vex'tar straightened, his warrior pride demanding he regain control of the conversation. The Korathi have perfected guerrilla warfare over millennia. We are masters of unconventional tactics, striking from shadows and melting away like mist. That's nice, Jake said politely. We learned that lesson too, but we might have taken it a bit further than most. Let me tell you about Vietnam. Another human conflict, I suppose? You're catching on. This one was interesting because it showcased human adaptability. See, we sent our military to fight in terrain we'd never encountered, against an enemy who'd been living in that environment for generations. Thick jungle, oppressive heat, monsoon rains. The locals knew every trail, every hiding spot, every advantage the landscape offered. Vex'tar's confidence began to return. And you were defeated by superior tactics and knowledge of terrain. A predictable outcome. Well, not exactly. Jake scratched his chin thoughtfully. The thing is, humans are really good at adapting. When the enemy started using tunnel systems, we learned to fight underground. When they set booby traps, we started making our own. When they melted away into the jungle, we brought in helicopters and sensors and chemical defoliants. Chemical weapons? The Xenothari delegate's carapace had gone pale. Oh, we didn't stop there. We turned farming equipment into weapons. Agricultural planes became bombers. Fertilizer became explosives. Garden tools became implements of war. When the enemy hid in villages, we relocated entire populations. When they used the jungle for concealment, we removed the jungle. Vex'tar found his voice again, though it came out as more of a croak. How long did this conflict last? About 20 years, depending on how you count it. But here's the really interesting part. While we were learning jungle warfare in Southeast Asia, we were simultaneously fighting desert campaigns in the Middle East, cold weather operations in Korea, and urban warfare in dozens of other locations. Humans are remarkably good at fighting multiple wars at once. The room's atmosphere had shifted noticeably. What had started as entertainment was beginning to feel like something else entirely. You adapt your tactics for different environments? Asked the crystalline delegate, its faceted form refracting light nervously. Oh, we don't just adapt tactics, we adapt everything. Equipment, training, doctrine, psychology. When humans encounter a new type of warfare, we study it, improve on it, and then teach it to everyone else. Every conflict becomes a learning experience for the next one. Vex'tar was no longer chuckling. These wars you describe, how many casualties? Vietnam? About 3 million, give or take. But that was relatively small compared to some of our other projects. Jake noticed the increasing tension in the room and seemed to take it as encouragement to continue. Of course, that was all back when we had to be physically present to kill each other. These days, we've become much more efficient. Efficient? Vex'tar's voice was barely above a whisper. Oh yes, modern human warfare is quite the technological marvel. We can eliminate targets from the other side of the planet without leaving our breakfast table. Drone aircraft controlled by operators sitting in comfortable chairs thousands of miles away. Satellite-guided missiles that can thread the needle between buildings to hit a specific window. The Vorthan delegate's tentacles had wrapped tightly around her torso. You fight from space? Not just space. We've weaponized information itself. Cyber warfare that can cripple entire civilizations without firing a shot. We can turn your own infrastructure against you. Make your computers forget how to function. Crash your economy with a few keystrokes. Jake was warming to his subject now, speaking with the enthusiasm of someone describing a favorite hobby. And our special forces. Oh, you'd love our special forces. They're trained to operate in any environment. Underwater for hours, high-altitude insertions, Arctic survival, urban infiltration. They can speak multiple languages, blend into local populations, and eliminate targets without anyone knowing they were ever there. Targets? Vex'tar managed. Individual people, infrastructure, communication networks, supply lines. Really anything that needs eliminating. And the beautiful part is how we prepare for contingencies. We have detailed plans for fighting in zero gravity, underwater cities, Arctic wastelands, desert planets, asteroid belts. We've war-gamed scenarios that haven't even happened yet. The silence was profound now. Every delegate in the immediate area had stopped their own conversations to listen, and many were looking decidedly uncomfortable. We train for every possible type of warfare because humans have this quirky habit of encountering every possible type of warfare. Eventually. Jake's smile had become almost predatory. Chemical, biological, nuclear, cyber, psychological, economic, environmental. We've tried them all, usually on each other first to work out the bugs. Ambassador Click's knock made a sound like air escaping from a punctured container. How many humans have died in your wars? In total? Hard to say. A few 100 million in the 20th century alone. But that brings me to the really interesting part of this story. Jake leaned forward, his casual demeanor taking on a more serious edge. Everything I've described so far, all these wars and conflicts and technological terrors, they all have one thing in common. Can anyone guess what that is? The assembled delegates stared at him in horrified silence. They were all humans fighting other humans. Same species, same basic capabilities, same home planet. We were divided into competing nations, ideologies, religions, economic systems. We fought over resources, territory, pride, revenge, and sometimes just because we were bored. Vex'tar's exoskeleton had lost its lustrous sheen, taking on a dull, grayish hue. All internal conflicts? Every single one. For most of human history, our greatest enemy was ourselves. We spent thousands of years perfecting the art of killing other humans, and we got very, very good at it. Jake's voice carried an almost wistful tone. But then something interesting happened. What? The crystalline delegate asked, though its prismatic form was flickering with what might have been fear. We stopped fighting each other. Oh, we still have disagreements, but about 50 years ago we realized we had bigger things to worry about, like making contact with galactic civilization, for instance. The implications hit the room like a physical wave. Vex'tar's forearms began to tremble slightly. You mean he started, then stopped? I mean that everything I've described represents a species that was handicapping itself. Imagine what happens when 8 billion humans stop fighting each other and start working together. When all that creativity, all that technological innovation, all that tactical brilliance gets focused in the same direction. Jake stood up, and several delegates actually took a step backward. 8 billion humans, Commander Vex'tar. That's more than the total population of 17 member worlds of this council. Every one of them capable of the kind of thinking that turned farming equipment into weapons and figured out how to split atoms for fun. But your technology is primitive, Vex'tar protested weakly. Your ships are slow, your weapons are crude. Are they? Jake asked mildly. How would you know? The ships we've shown you are the ones we use for peaceful exploration and trade. Did you really think we'd bring our military hardware to a diplomatic meeting? The room was dead silent now. Even the ambient hum of the station's life support seemed muted. The beautiful thing about humans, Jake continued, is that we prepare for everything. Right now, there are humans studying every species in this council, learning your languages, your cultures, your technologies, your weaknesses, not because we want to invade you, but because that's what humans do. We study things. Vex'tar tried to speak and found he couldn't. His respiratory system, evolved for a high-gravity world with thin atmosphere, was struggling to process what he was hearing. The proud warrior who had entered this conversation looking for entertainment was now having trouble remembering how to breathe. "I don't," he finally managed, his voice a barely audible rasp. "We thought," the intelligence report said, "that we were harmless?" Jake's smile was back, but it looked different now. Sharper. "Well, we are harmless. To friends. The thing about humans is that we really genuinely prefer peace. We're actually quite pleasant to get along with, most of the time. We like making friends, sharing stories, learning about new cultures." He extended his hand toward Vex'tar, the same gesture that had seemed so casual earlier now carrying entirely different weight. "We just happen to be very, very good at the alternative." Vex'tar stared at the offered hand as if it were a loaded weapon. Which, he was beginning to realize, it might as well be. Around the room, other delegates were having similar realizations. The Zenithari ambassador was frantically updating his datapad, probably sending urgent messages to his homeworld. The Vorthan delegate had wrapped all her tentacles around herself in a defensive posture. The crystalline representative was refracting light in patterns that suggested extreme agitation. "Why are you telling us this?" Vex'tar asked, his voice hollow. "Because you asked," Jake replied simply. "You wanted to hear about humanity's military achievements. I figured you deserved an honest answer. But the implications, if other species knew. Other species do know. Why do you think your intelligence reports labeled us as harmless?" "Because we want to be harmless. It's much easier to make friends when people aren't terrified of you." Jake's expression softened slightly. "The thing is, Commander, humans have learned something that many warrior species never figure out. The strongest possible position isn't being feared. It's being underestimated by your enemies while being completely trusted by your friends." Vex'tar finally understood. The casual dismissal, the primitive technology, the seemingly defenseless exploration ships, it was all deliberate. Humans weren't a joke species that had stumbled into galactic civilization. They were a predator species that had chosen to present themselves as prey. "What do you want from us?" he whispered. "Same thing we've always wanted. Peace, trade, cultural exchange, maybe some good stories to share around the campfire. We're really not complicated, Commander. We just want to be left alone to explore the universe and make friends." Jake started to turn away, then paused. "Oh, and Commander? When you file your report about this conversation, you might want to recommend that the Korathi Empire approve our diplomatic requests. All of them." Enthusiastically. Vex'tar nodded numbly, his warrior pride completely forgotten. Yes, I think that would be wise." As Jake walked away, whistling a cheerful human tune, Vex'tar slumped into the nearest chair. Around him, other delegates were beginning to disperse, all of them suddenly finding urgent reasons to contact their homeworlds. The Peace Summit of Harmony 7 would go down in galactic history as the day humanity stopped being the Council's comic relief and became its most valued ally. Not through threats or demonstrations of force, but through the simple act of telling the truth about what humans were capable of when they stopped holding back. And in the years that followed, whenever young aliens asked their elders why everyone was so careful to maintain good relations with the seemingly harmless humans, they would be told about Commander Vex'tar and the day he forgot how to breathe. The humans, for their part, continued to be exactly as friendly and peaceful as they had always claimed to be. They just made sure that everyone understood the choice they were making.